Hello and hi there. It's Rob here from Lookwild Film Competition. Thank you guys all for joining this endeavour that we're pushing through at the moment. I think it's a really great idea. I love wildlife filmmaking personally, and if I can get other people interested in it, looking out in our gardens at the moment. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but there's a black cat that's madly singing away in the garden at the moment. It's a beautiful spring morning. And a great day to make some wildlife films. So what we're going to do this morning is just go through a couple of simple ideas about how you can use the camera a bit more efficiently if you're using a smartphone or any other type of camera like an SLR or even a GoPro or something like that. And then some ideas of how to get the camera moving a little bit to make the shots a bit more interesting. And then finally, some ideas about how you can bring a sequence of shots together to introduce a certain place, so like a corner of your garden or something or other. Now, if a lot of you are actually getting out into your gardens and trying to look for wildlife, you may have noticed that wildlife filmmaking has its challenges. There's two ways of really approaching it. Either you go to the wildlife or you bring the wildlife to you. Now, I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks or so to give some extra ideas on things like how you can make moth traps, how you can bring hedgehogs to your garden perhaps. But think about all the stuff that goes on in your garden during the day and at night as well, and think about then trying to find patterns of behaviour which you can see repeated, and then go and get your camera set up to capture, so you can start weaving a story into some of these ideas. I am self-taught at this, and really simply through kind of watching wildlife and trying to see where wildlife is, and then experimenting. Right, there's no fixed hard rules when it comes to making films. A lot of it is finding out what works for you, how much patience you have, and then just really pulling whatever you can to do to technically make your films work, and we'll have a look into that in a little bit. Right, so I'm going to just switch over to a bit of film that I've used for this purpose. That has been something I've shot in the garden over the last few days with my son. So first of all, let's talk about how we stabilize the camera. Now, getting stable shots is one of the biggest things in filmmaking. Really, what you want to try and do is make sure that the camera is moving so little in a way that you actually want to focus clearly on what you're trying to tell the viewer. So in this case, I'm taking a shot of my lad using a tripod and setting it up in front of the camera. Now, very, very simply, something like a simple tripod. It doesn't really need to be, it could just be a stand, perhaps with a tape on top of it. Just anything to get the camera still and steady. Now, what we can also do is use something, in this case, we're using a phone holder that would usually go in a car, and just putting that around the camera itself, around the smartphone, so that you've got an extra point of holding the camera. So if wherever you're holding the camera, always try and make sure you're holding it with two hands, because that's going to give you the most stable possible shot. And again, we're looking to try and keep these shots nice and stable, and any movements that we do really nice and smooth, so it's not jarring the eye of the viewer themselves, should I say. So again, the idea of very slowly moving around up and down an object is going to, give you an interesting shot and an interesting angle. So when you're doing stuff like this, try and keep those movements, to say, very smooth and very clear. I probably haven't got much footage on here as well but the idea of trying to make sure that if you're looking at a subject, then trying to see if you can capture it from as many different angles as possible and see which angles work best. Now, by that I mean if you are straight on. So for example, my son here, I'm almost at eye level with him, looking towards the shot. I've got some background in place, and I'm focused clearly. The object of our attention in this shot is the phone that he's using to actually film that with. Now, if that, for example, was a snail, then I might want to get a sideways shot. I might want to get a wide shot to show the type of environment that the snail is in, and then I might want to get a closer shot using the zoom to actually go in. Now, if you're using a zoom or using the zoom within the smartphone and certainly moving the camera at the same time, the more that you're zoomed in, the more that any movement has an impact. So just if you're using the camera in a sort of a walkabout style, then make sure that you're setting quite a wide zoom so that there's not so much shake in the picture itself. But yeah, I mean, again, experiment, walk around, see what's around your garden, see the things that you can film, with the idea that, we're trying to build some footage up so that we can make a story that starts somewhere, has a middle, and then an end. Now, Charlotte Serpel has written a great document that I'm going to attach to the email as well, that has got some fantastic ideas about, simple construction and a simple approach to storyboarding and ideas about how you get started with, constructing a film. Again, don't be too afraid of this process. There's no real rights and wrongs. Just give it a try. If it doesn't work, think about, okay, let's try something else. What else can we do? So filmmaking is all about being adaptable, and keeping your mind open to trying different ways of getting the shot that you want, and getting the, perhaps the target of your shooting in the right place at the right time, or you being in the right place at the right time. So what we're going to do after this point now is we're going to just talk about some simple ideas for camera movement. Now, if you watch pretty much any film, most films have some form of movement of the camera, which basically gives it what we call a higher production value, and that basically means is that the person who's watching it is looking at the footage and thinking, wow, that looks amazing. And the idea of keeping it moving, it keeps the human brain stimulated. So for example, this is a shot here I did quite a while ago, but up at Clifton, this is many years ago actually, using what we call a dolly technique, where the camera slides from one direction to the other. In this case, what I'm also doing is transitioning from bluebells that haven't quite gone to flower straight into bluebells that are actually flowering. So again, keeping the camera moving so that it gives the person watching a feeling of, wow, there's something going on here, there's something now setting this up. Now, dollies are very, very simple to make. There are plenty of YouTube videos out there that allow you to do things for virtually a zero budget. The main thing is you need something with wheels on it and something that you can use as a track. Now, in this case, we're using just a bit of Lego. If we turn the Lego over, what we can do is we can see there's just a couple of simple, very, very simple wheels on the underside. And we're just literally got it so that it's sliding along this plank, and with just a bit of point there. Now, you could use roller skates, or you could use anything that's like a truck or whatever, and then just simply pop the camera in there, start recording, and then gently slide it backwards and forwards along this. Now, this can be great for, again, we're using a sort of a plant pot in front of us here. This can be great if you're looking to, for example, if you've got a shot with lots of bees that are going towards a flowering plant. If you do a sort of a long dolly shot against those, it can be a really nice way of setting that scene up to show that, yeah, there's lots going on in this particular area that'll give a really nice cinematic feel to your footage. Again, this is ones where we're just getting it smooth can be quite a challenge, but again, it's just done through practice. So here's one we shot with that setup with a nice bunny in the middle there. Obviously not really wildlife, but I hope you get the idea. Another thing that I've used quite well in the past, so if you can't move the camera, then try a method of actually moving the subject that you're actually filming. So in this case, using a turntable, for a monitor turntable, so an old monitor turntable. Young folk won't even know what that means these days. Or something like a Lazy Susan, something that allows you to spin it around. You could even make, use Lego to make a sort of a rotating plate. Here we've done that in the past, but the idea that here, rather than moving the camera, you're just moving the subject. Now, again, can take a little bit of practice to get right, but the idea is that you're spinning an object around and making it look more interesting. Now, I've used this in the past. Obviously, get the movement smooth can be quite a challenge. But I've used this in the past to come up with shots like this one for this snail at the moment. So whereas I'm moving very slowly, moving the table that the snail is sitting on, but also at the same time moving the camera slightly up and down to give this sort of amazing feeling that this creature is moving through space. But also, and again, snails are a great subject to film because, you know, they move slowly. You can quite easily, safely, without disturbing them very much, move them from one place to another to get into the right position. So I'll just show that one again. So those two shots. So just very simply, just watch these again. You know how it adds to real feeling of amazement of what's going in these shots. I really like these type of shots, but very simply achieved just by using a simple turntable. So again, a lot of this stuff is thinking about what's around you and thinking about what type of things that you could use. You know, you don't need to go out and spend a lot of money or any money on a lot of this stuff. You know, there are simple ways to achieve these sort of things. There's also some great YouTube videos out there. You know, if you search for, you know, DIY film dolly or you know, DIY film crane, there's loads of ways of doing things just with the stuff that sits around your house. So the last thing I want to cover on this video is you know, simple concept of introducing a scene. I'm going to link to a YouTube video where a chap does this in a forest, and it's actually really good. You know, uses a really simple camera and some really simple techniques to weave together a really amazing little piece of film that starts by looking at, you know, the wider landscape around you, then starts focusing in on certain areas and, you know, highlighting mushrooms or highlighting, you know, certain plants that are growing. It's a really great little idea, but it really starts with a simple concept of, you know, you're starting a story and you want to introduce to the audience where you are. So this is my garden. I'm standing at the top, and I'm simply just going to do a little pan from left to right, just over to the side here, and we can see that there's a lilac bush up here on the left hand side that I want to then focus in. So a nice sort of a wide shot. This can be a panning shot, or it can be just a static shot, just to show the viewer that we are in a garden. And, you know, there are some things that we can figure out. What can we figure out from the garden itself? So we can figure out that, you know, there's probably kids that live here. It's probably, you know, sometime in the spring. You know, the people that live here, they like wildlife because they've got bird feeders out. So, you know, just some things that introduce to the viewer the type of people that live here, perhaps, and, you know, and the type of then wildlife that we might discover in this garden. So from the wide shot, we then go into like a medium shot, something like this. So again, I'm focusing in this case on the lilac bush because I know that there's a likelihood there'll be butterflies here. And in fact, if I look right at the house at the moment, there's a couple of holly blues and an orange tip, which is lovely. So we have this sort of medium shot where we're looking up at the bush, and then that follows up by what we call then a close-up. So we're going to sort of establish it, move in, and then finally give us a sort of a close-up here. Now this is the point, for example, if we were looking at butterflies here or we were looking at bees, where we then might want to transition to the footage of our bees or our butterflies doing anything. So that you know, that really simple concept of, and again, back to the fact that there are no real hard rules here, but there are some sort of conventions and ways of doing things that our brains have been trained to in, you know, watching lots and lots of TV and films in our times. But, you know, this concept of set the shot up or and then, you know, gradually move to different shots that then take a viewer on a journey is one of good ways to actually start with you know, making a film and setting a story up. Right, so I'm planning on doing a couple more of these videos as in the next couple of weeks, covering things like a bit more of the storytelling process and then the editing side of things, using your different pieces. But really, just get out into the garden, see what wildlife you can find. You know, if it's under a brick or, you know, in a puddle or, you know, hiding underneath you know, a wood pile or something like that, and then see if you could get some sort of interesting footage from them that you can then repeat and think about getting in different ways. So if it's like a slow worm, get a close-up of its head, get a wider shot of the bush that it's sitting under. See if you can then go back on a couple of days and see if the slow worm's still there. They tend to be very much creatures of habit. If you've got flowers that are visited regularly by bees or by butterflies, then go and see those, and sit around and wait. Filmmaking does require some patience sometimes, but it really can be very worthwhile. Right, thanks folks. If you've got any questions at all, I'm monitoring the Wild Maidenhead Gmail address, so please ping those over and have fun. Cheers.